Picture this. You are sitting in a room with 60 strangers. Lights and cameras illuminate a mock office, and your entire contribution to the production, your one job, is to walk from point A to point B carrying a cup of coffee. Okay.
Action. Cut. Reset. And action. Cut. Reset. And action. Cut.
For 6 hours. That was me when I lived in New York City and worked as a background actor. And for the girl who had been the lead in the musical, the captain on the sports team, the big fish in the small South Dakota pond, this was a bit of an adjustment. But my time on set also taught me some of the most important lessons I know about communication, about leadership, and about what it actually means to be essential. I moved to New York City sight unseen, apartment, roommate and all, to try out city life and to see what working in the entertainment business was all about. 2 weeks in, I booked my first job as a background actor on one of my favorite shows. I was ecstatic for the opportunity to work with writers, directors, and actors I had admired for years. I was in it. And before I continue, I need to say something about background actors because they do not get nearly enough credit. Background actors are the backbone of television. They're the reason you believe the office space is buzzing or that the subway car is full of New Yorkers. Without background actors, the world of the show collapses. They matter. We mattered. But trust me, I'll never forget when my first episode aired, there I was on screen. Blurry. Beautifully, professionally blurry. And I had a choice to make. I could choose to accept the title of just background, or I could start figuring out a way to go from extra to essential. To understand how I started to become essential, you need to understand how communication works on a television set. Directors talk to background actors like they're bowling. They line up, they aim, and they release. The message travels down the lane until it hits its intended target. Emily, when you hear action, you're gonna walk to this spot carrying a cup of coffee. Okay, I'd reply with a big smile. And I would repeat that action over and over until the director got their intended take. It was clear, it was efficient, it was one way. But look what happens when the directors are talking to principal characters. The entire game shifts. The director becomes a charades player, cooperative, interpersonal, back and forth. They say things like, "How did this take feel for you?" Or, "Next time we run it, can your motivation be this instead of this?" The direction becomes a conversation, what communication researchers call the process of sending, receiving, and adapting verbal and nonverbal messages as a way to shape meaning together. As a background actor, I only played one game. I was being bowled at. But I refused to be just a pin, so I created a new game. Ping pong. You see, I knew my direction. I knew the instruction and where to aim my shot. But my character takes that information and hits it back just a little bit differently. You see, my character has a reason to be in that office. She has instincts and motivations. So if the instruction is to sit at the desk and read the paper, well, the ping pong response is sit at the desk, read the paper, see something in the paper that makes you pick up the phone and make a phone call. Give the scene a little bit of a heartbeat. I allowed myself full permission to bring more, even when no one asked me to. And that's when I started to realize that the gap between extra and essential isn't about status, but it's about how deeply you choose to engage with the work in front of you. I want to tell you about someone who taught me the other side of this, On one of my longer-running shows, I was cast as the background assistant to a supporting character. My desk was right outside of his office, and there would be scenes where he'd come over to my desk to look at my calendar or make a phone call. And on this actor's first day on set, he did something I had never seen before. He walked up to the background actors, looked us in the eye, and he shook our hands. An act like this was incredibly rare. You see, in the world of television production, we have this universal hierarchy. You have first team actors, and those are the principal characters. Second team are the stand-ins, and then you have your background actors in the holding rooms. The principal actors are not required to acknowledge the background actors, and most of the time they don't. Not out of cruelty or anything, but just out of this invisible culture that sets form. But this actor didn't disappear into his dressing room when the director called cut. Instead, he came out and he talked to the background actors. He learned our names, he told us about his life, his dogs, his stories, and he asked us about ours. Now here's why that matters so profoundly. There's a theory called symbolic interactionism, which was developed by George Herbert Mead and Herbert Blumer, which states that human beings treat people and things based on the meaning we assign them. We don't respond to objective reality, we respond to the meaning we've made of it. So if you're treated like background, like set decoration, you start to feel like background, and you shrink into that mark. But this actor reassigned meaning. By treating us like people worth knowing, he fundamentally shifted the way we saw ourselves on set. I'll never forget on that final day of filming, here he is photobombing my pictures. He's laughing and celebrating with a group of background actors. And I realized that his generosity didn't diminish him, but actually, it multiplied him. When he was on set, we worked harder. We brought more energy to the scenes, and we had way more fun. And all of this was happening because someone who mattered told us, without saying a single formal word, that we mattered too. That is leadership by influence, not authority. That's what it looks like to go from a number on a call sheet to essential. There's a short story by Hermann Hesse called Journey to the East, which tells of a group of travelers who set out on a grand spiritual pilgrimage accompanied by their servant Leo. Leo carries the bags and sings happy songs to keep everyone's spirits lifted. But then one day, Leo disappears. The entire group of travelers falls apart. Without Leo, they cannot go on. Their entire journey collapses. Years later, the narrator learns the truth, that Leo was not just a servant, but actually the head of the entire order, the true leader on the journey. But since his leadership was so quiet and rooted in service, nobody realized it until it was gone. Robert Greenleaf used this story to create his entire framework of servant leadership, writing that the great leader is first experienced as a servant. Great leaders don't command from the top, rather they lift from below. On set, I was learning to be Leo. I was serving the production and helping the world of the show feel real. And I was watching servant leaders all around me, like my friend Abby, who on my first day on set gave me advice and had the foresight to know I needed it. Like our assistant director, Lincoln, who advocated for background actors to be a part of that final shot of the series. Like the actor that shook my hand. Influence that is rooted in trust, relationships, and genuine care, that's what makes a set work. It's what makes any organization work. Now, eventually, in between takes and sitting in holding rooms, I realized that New York City and background acting weren't for me at the time, and my intuition told me I had work to do back home. So I packed my bags, moved back to South Dakota, and realized something almost immediately. In South Dakota, I have status. I have a title and a leadership role. I was no longer in the background. But there were lessons I learned on set that no title could ever teach me. I wanted to be like the actor that shook my hand. For the past 4 years, I've been working with a student named Chad. Chad brings light and joy into every room he walks into. Chad will make you belly laugh and listen like you're the only person in the room. During Chad's freshman year, I didn't command from the top, but instead I showed up, asked questions, and I made Chad know he was seen, not as just a student in my program, but as a person worth knowing. And now, 4 years later, I see Chad doing that for others. Chad's building future leaders not out of a title and not out of authority, but because someone once told him that he was a person worth knowing. And that is the lineage of servant leadership. It compounds and it multiplies. Now, I realize that the world of television production and background acting, that might not be familiar to you. But I also recognize that the feeling of being an extra, unseen, unacknowledged, blurry in the background of someone else's story, well, that's one of the most universal experiences there are. We've all sat in that holding room before. It's when we move to a new community, start a new job, or enter a new chapter. And you ask yourself, am I seen? Do I matter? You do. And to those of you listening who sit at that first team table, who have title and status, you have an extraordinary power. You have the power to walk across the room, the power to learn someone's name, the power to treat the background like they're in the foreground. And not because it's required of you, but because that is the only kind of leadership that actually lasts. My journey took me from small town South Dakota to New York City and back home again. And what I realized in between takes, in holding rooms, on set, and in the people who saw me, is that being essential has nothing to do with how many scenes you're in, but everything to do with how fully you show up for the ones you are in. Thank you.